Thank you very much. I'm going to try to walk around. See some friends in the audience. Thanks to our colleagues in the Art Foundation for inviting me to this talk. I guess we're talking about getting a frailty ready emergency preparedness culture, right? And and some of what I hope to share, maybe will give us some insights into that. Right. So in the next 30 minutes or so, we're at 9:35. In the next 30 minutes or so, I'll cover a little bit about aging, frailty, what it is. Um, Falls, why the big concern? A little bit about how to detect it, how to prevent it, and a little bit of a pinch about exercise and why it matters, and some reflections towards the end. Um, So when I was given the topic, of course we know silver generation gold standards, right? I did ask myself, what is it about silver that makes it so special? Why do we call it the silver generation? Is it the hair color? Is it lived experience? Is it because the reserve is not so much? Um, is it because it's softer than steel? But just because silver is softer than steel, it doesn't mean that it's worth less, right? So it's obviously something that is of value. And what's gold? The gold standards, right? What is gold? We know we talk about gold, it means meaningful relationships, dignity, but gold is precious strong because it's strong, right? It's precious because it's valued. And I guess that is what aging is about, isn't it? What does it matter? What does it matter? Not just the years we live, but how we live. Perhaps staying independent, perhaps being connected. And so this kind of frames what is aging. Right? Aging happens to everybody. Its decline is not linear, it's variable. It's something that is part of the tapestry of life, but perhaps we all understand the linear nature of it, from the cuteness of the young baby to the worrying behaviors of somebody who is old and childlike and childish. Right? So, and indeed, Professor Kenneth Longwood does describe it as a state of cumulative deficits from being very robust in the early stages to being much more dependent as you accumulate multiple deficits. But it is also a condition, and this is Linda Fried and her group, and really, it's a couple of features. When you become a bit weak, a bit slow, easily tired, and you don't do as many things, or you're beginning to lose weight. So one or two of these features is an early warning sign. And indeed, today we are thinking a little bit about how do we look at early warning signs, right? So one or two of these features, pre-frail, three or more, you really are considered frail. And what does frailty mean? Why are we so concerned about frailty? Because I guess it is a state of decreasing ability and decreasing capacity. And the WHO frames this very well. It's really looking at we can roughly divide it into three stages where we're robust, where we're declining, and when there's significant loss and we're heading towards our twilight stage of our lives. But our Ministry of Health's response is to really find different ways of trying to respond and to push our declining capacity upwards. Ways to push up functional ability, ways to push up our internal capacity, and enabling this through the way we design our neighborhoods and also the way we design our health systems. So, and the things that we're looking for are all these little things. This is nutrition, our walking, our hearing, our vision, our memory, our mood, our continence, and the amount of support that we have. So first and foremost, when you talk of frailty, when it's slowing, people, it doesn't make big impression. But when somebody falls, suddenly you go, oh no, grandma's fallen. Not just grandma's fallen again. There's this saying in Hokkien, right, in our language, like, "Wato is time." So, and it is true, one in three seniors fall, 1 in 3 fallers have serious consequences, and 1 in 3 fallers fall again. So why are we worried about hip fractures? Because they are quite serious. If you don't operate on a hip fracture, your mortality rate could go up to 25 to 30 to 35%. Uh, Even with surgery, when the mortality could be as much as 14 to 20%. But surgery does improve outcomes. It helps people get back on their feet. But even then, just only about 14% get back to the pre-morbid function and status. So, and complications are part and parcel of our challenges. So we want to try to do whatever we can to prevent falls from happening. We often talk about the index fall and the first fall, but we also want to talk about the pre-fall. So 3 key questions are always asked when you come into our aging centers. Have you fallen in the last 12 months? Do you feel unsteady when you stand or walk? And even if they say no, when you look at them and you eyeball them, you kind of roughly know, like, oh, it's very unsteady. Now you're worried about falling. No lah, I won't fall. I'm just stumbling away. So you can sort of sense what they tell you and what you see. So, and these are all the risk factors of falling, right? Vision, weakness, nutrition, where you don't eat enough, you lose muscle mass, aches and pains everywhere, take lots of medicines, your brain doesn't function well, your nerves are numb, your muscles, your joints are achy, you can't go to the toilet on time, there's steps and curbs, you can't get to the lift fast enough, you can't get to a chair, and you may have a host of medications that cause your blood pressure to drop, your sugar to be low, and your heart rhythm might be a bit wonky. So all these are kind of risks for falling. And in the same way, to prevent falls means looking out for all these things when we first respond to a patient, right? When we first respond to a senior, be it particularly in the self-care, the support, and the amount of access to health services they have. The blood pressure we're particularly worried about because 50 to 70% of people above the age of 50 to 70 have high blood pressure in Singapore. And many of them are on lots of medication, and that itself can cause the blood pressure to drop when you are not very consistent with your medication, or if you're losing weight loss on medication. And or as your nervous system becomes a little bit weaker with age. So making sure that the blood pressure doesn't drop when you're on blood pressure medicines extraordinarily is one of the caution that we try to be careful of. So when emergency services goes to a house and you see that grandma's on the floor, a few things come to mind, right? Where did they fall? What are the obstacles? Did they trip over something? Is there a toy on the ground? Is there a slippery rug along there? Were they trying to reach for something in the kitchen? Are things accessible? Is there a loose stool, a shaky stool? What are the floors like? What's the furniture like? Is a chair too low or too wobbly? A lot of old people sit on plastic chairs, right? So, and what's the lighting like? What are the bathrooms like, grandmas? Is it wet? Are things dangerous? And of course, before we leave the house, we look and see what medication can tell you, whether the medicines give us a clue. So every hospital has got these pamphlets of pulse pressure. This is ours. These are some of the things that they ask you to pay attention to. But one of the things that we have to figure out when we go into the person's house is whether we need to bring them to the hospital, or we can leave them at home. And as it is, if you can't get up from the floor, that's already a warning sign. But there are various ways of showing people how to get up from the floor, and some of these are good to practice, especially in the day centers, when you know that somebody is coming and they're going to go home to be alone. One of the questions is, if you do fall, are you able to get up again? Or if there are 2 seniors at home and they're both a little bit weak, if they do fall, how do we help them get up? So these are some of the strategies and some of the awareness that we hope to build in terms of familiarity among ourselves, but also as we engage our seniors to try to empower them. So this is a very detailed document. It's many pages, lots of references, lots of annexes brought together, all the experts in the entire world to just talk about falls. And there are a few take-home messages, right? It's quite serious. We really got to pay attention to it. As the population gets older, the whole world, it's going to be a global challenge for everybody. So opportunistic case finding means basically when somebody, when you come across someone who's fallen, everybody needs to know a little bit what you could do next. Because older people may not actually present when we fall, and they may not actually tell you that they've fallen. So the interventions need to be tailored to the individuals, but they do work. But actually, at the end of the day, beliefs and attitudes influence everything. Right? Lots more people, my parents included, have very strong views about what they're willing to do or what they're not willing to do, and it's not so easy to persuade. And of course, even if you can persuade them, it doesn't mean that you have resources for everything everywhere. And knowing what your neighborhood provides is quite important. So this is what we do in Singapore. HBB is for the live well, age well. There is opportunistic case finding. There are community nurses in every single precinct now, and they run community health posts. There are functional assessment in the polyclinic, and there are functional screening events in the communities. So these are opportunities. And the teams, and most hospitals have geriatric teams that are working very closely with the community teams to really pick up patients that have risk factors, to begin to intervene in the community and to escalate patients who are a little bit more high risk to the hospital. And this is something that I think, how do you generalize this concept? We do a whole bunch of things, but getting up from a chair is actually very informative. How somebody gets up just even one time. If somebody needs to hold on to the side to get up and leans backwards substantially to get up, it puts a lot of pressure on the arm, you know that the person is weak. Right, so the 5 chairs, there are gauges and markers to tell you whether somebody's 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, but that's not so important. What's important is, can somebody get up from a chair unsupported? And if they can get up once, is it steady? And if you want to test them, you can ask them to do it 5 times. And you can look and see whether they're fast or slow. Right? And in fact, just watching them walk, if somebody walks steadily like this is more than 1 meter per second. But if somebody's walking like that, you know that they're slow, right? So you don't have to do a 4-meter walk. You can just eyeball it and see whether somebody's steady or safe. And there is another test called the Get Up and Go test, which is just getting somebody up from a chair and walk a little bit, and then turn around and walk back to the chair again. And just one look, you know whether somebody is at risk of falling, right? So these are some of the clues. But if you have somebody who's very good, that means, 没问题, 你看我可以做，我做给你看, right? So if you had somebody like that, then one of the questions is, okay, you say you fall a lot of times. How many? This is the 5th time the SEDF has come to your house already. Then standing feet side by side, you can do it. Putting one foot in front or standing on tandem, they're so good getting them stand on one leg. Right? So these are ways of asking yourself, how steady is this person? And a lot of the people in the middle group actually can barely put their feet together. So the minute they walk, the walking might be a bit broad-based. The minute you ask them to put their feet together, they are unsteady. And that itself is already a red flag and a sign that something more probably should be done. And this is a study which myself and Marcus were involved in some years ago. Right? And what I like about the study is that it helps us visualize people in 4 rough intervention groups. The ones who can walk more than 20 minutes is a different group from the ones that can barely walk 30 seconds. So if you're having somebody who's very slow, can't walk much, can barely stand with their feet together, this is a very different group from somebody who says that they are actually able to walk 3 or 4 minutes. They are walking quite steadily. I mean, not that quickly. And there are some impairments according to what you've picked up. Okay, so these are some of the ideas and some of the way we sort people out into the different groups. And then the whole purpose of this, so the previous table gives you a sense of the types of exercises, but these are the concepts that we want to try to build up. So a lot of people say, I exercise, I walk every day, no, I don't need to do exercise anymore, no need. Come to the aging center, no need, right? So But if you begin to break it down, what are we trying to build? The most important thing in frailty management is actually muscle. And the only way to build muscle is strength, right? So strength is extremely important. Balance is also extremely important, and so is flexibility and endurance. And I've thought of we've been thinking of many ways on how to convince older people of its importance, right? So and I think and the minute you say 要运动 everybody goes, you don't hear anymore. Right? So we think in terms of components like strength. Li is is quite acceptable to the older generation, and qi is also acceptable, right? So when we really look at these two things on how do you build li, which is strength, and how do you build qi, which is breath and energy, as your way of framing this. And of course, you bring together the balance. It's hard to describe balance. Talk about wind, right? Or people, it's very hard. And flexibility is also hard to totally describe. And dancing. That's all quite difficult to describe. But conceptually, you understand that this is what people need to grasp. So nationally, actually, we've done quite a lot of things. So our response to low-fall skylights may not seem very organized, but actually many initiatives is involved. And the HPV has shared some of these slides with us. They've got a bunch of things from the website in the aging centers. Video links, web links, and exercise trainings, fitness in the park, and various opportunities which you can tap into at every single community precinct that is in the neighborhood. There's also an app, the Health 365 app, which has information and also has ways as location locators in terms of where the different programs are and different ways for you to upload your steps and so on and so forth. And the HPV divides the various programs into basic to slightly more targeted. So there's a lot of effort on strength, balance, and flexibility exercises. There is this very interesting exercise. I don't know how many of you have parents that go into it. It's called Rolling Good Times. It's available in the community centers, and it actually puts people onto the floor, onto mats, and teaching them how to roll. And you can see some of this, right? I'm standing on a yoga mat and really doing a forward plank and one leg raise. These are not easy, but they are extremely important to prevent falls. And finding the right robust group of people to channel them into this would be something which is very useful. Right, so there's this. There's for the frailer people, there's a program with Steady La, which is a little bit slow, but it focuses on the same thing, right? Sit to stand, toe raises, which strengthens your glutes and your abs. So hip abduction and various movements that focus on weight shifting. So these simple programs were slightly more robust. And there's also a program called the Happy Program, which is for slightly frailer people that focuses on movement and dual tasking, do two things at once. So these are some of the ways which we try to kind of nudge this whole community of exercise and community and practice for everybody. So even if you look at these pictures from HPV on the various activities on the Happy Program, you would see that there's resistance bands and there are different ways of activating it. And you can look at this. There are different ways of sitting up. It's not just sitting on a chair. You've got to get up. So that's the challenge. Right? A lot of our senior care center programs, most of the exercises are seated. But if you don't get up, you're not going to get enough core strength to be able to absorb your fall. So really getting up from a chair, sitting down from a chair, and really looking at people who crash land onto the chair. So, crash landing is probably one of the biggest signs of a fall waiting to happen. So if somebody goes on a chair and they're crashing in, there are things that you can work on. There are things you can say to them to reinforce. Sit forwards, lean forward, nose in front of your toes to get up and to sit down, so that you'll maintain your core muscle activation all the time. Your abs and your glutes are activating every single time you get out from a chair. And that you can do in the senior care center every single time somebody gets up and down from a chair, every single time somebody walks to the toilet. Reinforce some of these habits that will help strengthen the muscles and build resistance. And that is probably one of the key messages that we want to convey. Then this is our own program in CGH, the steady feed program, what's called CGH Steps. And it's again similar kind of principle. So rolling out exercises that are intensive enough, consistent, at least twice a week, and progressive. It needs to get progressively harder in order to make any benefit. Okay, and this is something from the Lian Foundation. There are 29 gyms and 5 in community hospitals, hospices, and so on. So 34 sites across the island. And the machines, it's I think you pay about $300 for 3 months of exercises. It's twice a week, 1 hour each, supervised by a trainer, and your data captured by an algorithm and a computer that helps you maintain a certain level of intensity. You're supposed to do 8 to 12 repetition maximums, 3 sets for each of the machines. And it's meant to be progressive. So as you get, it's too easy for you. The computer prompts you to do a little bit more, so that you get stronger and stronger. So getting stronger, going to the gym is not just for young, muscly people. It's also for older people like myself and all of us, and all the seniors that we look after. And how do you advocate for this? It doesn't matter where you start. Start somewhere, but there are many opportunities for progression. Okay. And this is ActiveSG. If you look into the ActiveSG website, this is from about 3 or 4 years ago. They've updated it, but there's a suite of things that really look at strength, balance, aerobic, which is endurance, flexibility, and agility. I asked them what's the difference between flexibility and agility. I guess it is different, right? So flexibility is just really being able to bend. Agility is really able to twitch and to move forward and to move forward. And there's this test called the 4-square test, right? Which is supposed to, it's not so easy. But these are the sort of things that we want people to be familiar with. And Sengkang already has this thing called the IPPTS, right? The individual, so which kind of individual physical performance test for seniors, right? and one of our dreams, I've been talking to my colleagues who run this, is that eventually we can have these IDPT stations for seniors in every single neighborhood, so that people not just know what to do, what to measure, and it goes into your Health 365 app, right? You also know how you progress, and you know where in the spectrum you're going. Because, most of us are a little bit reward driven, right? Especially the men. So, yeah, and having goals, having things that tell us that we're doing well, it goes a long way. This is the National Frailty Strategy mapping of all the programs you have. So what I've just shown you, if you go into the OH website and into the National Frailty Strategy report, it's actually trying to tabulate all these exercises and where they're supposed to be done for whom and so on. And of course, there's nothing beats this, isn't it? I mean, it still exists. The HPB app is still there. Supermarket vouchers still exist, and it's quite short to get $5 for every little bit of progress. So these are some of the ways to nudge us forward. Okay, so in conclusion, right? So since it's a first responder forum, right? We ask ourselves 3 questions. What would you notice early, and what could be prevented, and who can we help? So those are the 3 questions. So seeing frailty early, when it's pre-frail, right? When they're beginning to lose a bit of weight, when they're beginning to be weaker, slower, more tired, not so much activity. Any one of this is the time to notice that maybe something needs to be looked at. And of course, sometimes it's serious illness. You could be having heart disease, you could be having a malignancy, you could have diabetes, and it presents as any one of this. So this is a warning signal to perhaps see the doctor and just to make sure that there's nothing that's easily reversible that you miss and put off too much later. How did it start? What started first? Was it a strength problem? Was it a balance problem? Was it an energy problem? Same sort of thing, right? How do you begin to notice? Small signs, big meaning. Right? So when you go to the house of the first responder, look at the table, look at the fridge, look at signs of whether they're falling. and and also check the medicines. Are they taking their medicines? Do they know what the medicines are about? Do they need to see a doctor? Do they need a community nurse to come into the house? These are small little things. Um, and of course, what things, right? So we followed. So as a first responder, you always go, who do I call? And the next question is, know the neighborhood. If you're a first responder in this neighborhood, there are nodes around the neighborhood. We know where the AEDs are. The next thing is, do we know where the active aging centers are? Do we know where the well-being coordinators are? Those are our ambassadors. And all of us working together as a network will be what we are hoping to do to prevent the next fall. Right? What could have changed the outcome? The first call has happened. I've responded to a call as a first responder. The patient doesn't need to go to hospital. What can I do next? And we have more facilities, call centers now. There's care line that we can text, community jollies, isolated seniors too, and this are avenues where we can begin to make some surveillance. So look at family, look at volunteers, look at our neighbors. Don't forget independence, dignity, safety, um, community readiness saves lives. Emergency readiness starts long before 995. And what we're trying to protect people who are vulnerable, but we're trying to respect what is valuable and try to enhance what can be unlocked. So we saw all these concerning images of aging, but this WHO slide perhaps is quite encouraging. We want to try to get people mobile, learning, building and maintaining relationships so that they can continue to contribute as long as they can. So that's me. Thanks very much.